Anna!
Between 1:30 and 3 a.m.
Kill this dog. Oh!
Touchdown in Lauderdale, Knoxville, Neshoba counties. One F2 in Kemper killed a person and injured another.
Get out!
3 a.m. the supercells finally
It ain't caught.
Not leaving Mississippi battered and broken. Morning of Sunday, November 22nd, 1992. Broke with the cold front and its final squalling, racing into Alabama and Tennessee.
Lay down.
Still fueled by
Bad.
volatile and primed to detonate. But before the day was done, tornadoes would erupt across a vast stretch of the eastern United States. This next phase of the outbreak was defined by its sheer speed. Dozens of twisters moving scattered across multiple states. While most of them were weaker, embedded within the chaos were killers. Powerful F3s and F4s that slashed through communities. None would rival, however,
My neighbor hasn't been to a gas station in 4 months. I thought he was lying until he lent me his truck. A small device plugged into a truck cigarette lighter. 300 miles driven in 1 week, and the fuel gauge barely moved. When I asked my neighbor how that was possible, what he showed me exposed the biggest fuel scam in history. If you're tired of spending $50, $60, $80 every time you fill up, or if you're sick of watching your tank go from full to empty before the week is even over, you need to hear this. My name is Tom. I'm a family doctor. I've been treating patients in rural Missouri for 30 years, driving across 3 counties to see them. Anyone who does house calls knows the fuel situation is a nightmare. You're putting 200, 300 miles a week on your car just to do your job. Gas is your second biggest expense after insurance. You're at the pump 3-4 times a week, and it never gets cheaper. So when my car broke down last month on a Monday morning, I was in trouble. Full schedule, patients across 2 counties.
Tomorrow. That means we could see tornadoes, actually a few larger ones.
April 20th, 2011.
Midst of possibly an historic tornado outbreak.
The United States is still reeling from weeks of non-stop meteorological violence. Meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, are examining the newest computer model outputs, and over the coming days are met with a deeply unsettling reality. Forecasters realize with horror that the ingredients for something dangerous, something truly historic, are coming together over the southern United States. From April 25th to April 27th, 2011, the atmosphere over the Deep South will align in a way few have ever seen, creating one of the most favorable setups for violent tornadoes in recorded history, one poised to unleash chaos and devastation across the Southeast. Over the span of those next 79 harrowing hours, a historic onslaught of 362 tornadoes would tear across 21 states, and 4 of those would reach EF5 intensity, the very peak of nature's fury.
This is a tornado emergency.
Tornado emergency, and all you can do is pray for those people.
By the time the atmosphere finally relented, 324 lives had been lost, and thousands were left injured. Entire towns lay in ruins as tens of billions of dollars in damage stretched across the landscape. Today, we will return to late April 2011 to witness the fury in history, uncover the science, and confront the legacy to figure out what we've learned in the now 15 years since the most destructive tornado outbreak in modern American history, the 2011 super outbreak.
Be in a safe place right now. Every one of these is considered on the ground now.
I'm CJ, and this is Florida Man Weather. To understand how one of the most ferocious tornado outbreaks in American history unfolded, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. After all, severe weather outbreaks like this one don't just appear out of nowhere. They're the final, violent expression of a powder keg fueled with the right atmospheric ingredients. And in late April 2011, that powder keg ignited with rare and deadly force. Right on the heels of the forgotten outbreak, another wave of severe weather, a multi-day tornado outbreak sequence, would erupt across portions of the Midwest and Mid-South from April 19th to the 24th, producing another 134 tornadoes, including a violent EF4 that tore through the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri, and slammed directly into St. Louis's Lambert International Airport. By the time forecasters had turned their attention to the setup developing for the final week of April, they weren't just looking at an atmosphere that was building towards something. They were looking at one that had been extremely volatile for weeks, and one that now, somehow, was preparing to outdo all of it. The weather system responsible for the 2011 super outbreak began, like they all do, high up in the atmosphere. A powerful dip in the jet stream, an upper-level trough, began carving its way across the central United States, acting like a giant atmospheric engine, fueling rising air and storms below. By April the 25th, the upper-level system had moved into the southern plains and helped spin up a large, intensifying area of low pressure near the Oklahoma-Missouri border. As that low strengthened and pushed off to the northeast, it began pulling 2 very different air masses onto a collision course. Warm, humid air would begin surging northward from the Gulf, and cooler, drier air would sweep down behind the system from the Rockies. Think of it like 2 freight trains on the same track, each carrying a different kind of fuel, and there's no way to stop the crash. The Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, had already been watching the system closely, and on April 25th, they would issue a moderate risk outlook for severe weather for portions of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. The next morning, that would be upgraded to a rare high risk for April the 26th. And to put this in perspective, high risk outlooks are only issued a handful of times per year, sometimes only a handful of times per decade. That means that high risk days aren't just a warning that bad weather is possible. They are a declaration that a major potential
Tomorrow. That means we could see tornadoes, actually a few larger ones.
April 20th, 2011.
This to possibly an historic tornado outbreak.
The United States is still reeling from weeks of non-stop meteorological violence. Meteorologists at the Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, are examining the newest computer model outputs, and over the coming days are met with a deeply unsettling reality. Forecasters realize with horror that the ingredients for something dangerous, something truly historic, are coming together over the southern United States. From April 25th to April 27th, 2011, the atmosphere over the Deep South will align in a way few have ever seen, creating one of the most favorable setups for violent tornadoes in recorded history, one poised to unleash chaos and devastation across the Southeast. Over the span of those next 79 harrowing hours, a historic onslaught of 362 tornadoes would tear across 21 states, and 4 of those would reach EF5 intensity, the very peak of nature's fury.
This is a tornado emergency.
Tornado emergency. And all you can do is pray for those people.
By the time the atmosphere finally relented, 324 lives had been lost, and thousands were left injured. Entire towns lay in ruins as tens of billions of dollars in damage stretched across the landscape. Today, we will return to late April 2011 to witness the fury in history, uncover the science, and confront the legacy to figure out what we've learned in the now 15 years since the most destructive tornado outbreak in modern American history, the 2011 super outbreak.
Be in a safe place right now. Every one of these is considered on the ground now.
I'm CJ, and this is Florida Man Weather.
If your booty looks like this, if your belly looks like this, and your arms look like this,
This Monday, April 27th, we start Tai Chi Challenge for beginners. On Monday, April 27th, we're starting the Tai Chi program for beginners. Build strength and lose up belly fat with just 7 minutes a day. In 1 week, you'll feel it. In 2 weeks, you'll see it. In a month, you'll be turning heads. Start on April 27th. You in?
This is day 1 of my sister practicing Tai Chi. This is day 28 of my sister practicing Tai Chi.
On Monday, April 27th, we're launching a beginner-friendly Tai Chi transformation program for women. With just 7 minutes a day, you'll gently strengthen your body, release stress, and start burning stubborn belly fat. By May 4th, you'll feel lighter and more energized. By May 11th, you'll notice your posture and waistline change. By May 18th, others will start seeing your transformation. By summer, you'll feel connected to your body in a whole new way. All you have to do is open the app, breathe, and follow the flow. Your new energy, your new body start here.
If I start tomorrow, what can I expect? I'm 56.
That's the perfect age. Start on Monday, and in a month, you'll look like a different woman.
Wait, but I haven't exercised in years.
That's okay. Tai Chi is specifically built for beginners 50 plus, especially those who've been out of fitness for years.
Wouldn't the gym be better?
No. After 40, gym exhausts you. Tai Chi strengthens, restores, and reshapes you faster than anything you ever did in your 20s.
Do I need equipment?
Nope. Just your body in 8 minutes. Start tomorrow and watch your body get younger week by week.
So what do I do first?
Tap the screen, grab the app, and begin tomorrow.
If you eat butter daily, this is what happens to your eyes. Take a look at these 2 retina scans. They both look sharp, focused, and healthy. But only one of them belongs to someone young. The other? It's the eye of a 74-year-old man who nearly lost his vision for good. His simple fix? Doing one tiny thing each night before bed. So if you wear glasses or contacts and are struggling with blurry vision, floaters, or living with cataracts, macular degeneration, glaucoma, or any other vision impairments, then I've got something important to share with you. So about a year ago, my wife came home from her routine eye exam, and I could tell something was off. She wasn't smiling. She didn't say much. Then she sat down at the kitchen table and said something I'll never forget. The doctor said my vision is declining fast. There's no cure. He said we can try drops or even monthly injections, but that's really all you can do. I couldn't believe it, because we had dreams of traveling, seeing the northern lights in Iceland, walking through the Louvre, taking our grandkids to the Grand Canyon. And all of that to be taken away within a year. Because the doctor said that's how long it could be before she might need help just walking around the house and might end up in the nursing home. I was devastated. And after more testing, we finally got an answer. Her eyes were clogged. Tiny blood vessels in the back of her eyes were twisted and blocked, literally suffocating her vision. The oxygen and nutrients that kept her sight strong were cut off. No wonder she was bumping into furniture, asking me to read the fine print, seeing hazy shapes instead of sharp faces. And the scariest part? The doctor said if you ignore worsening vision, even just a little dark spots for too long, the damage might become irreversible. Now, I'm sharing this story not to scare you, but to share what we've discovered as the way to fix this, without pills or anything unnatural. Because what we discovered right after that exam changed everything for us. We came across a documentary about a canceled optometrist whose research was quietly removed from public archives. He had spent decades studying how vision truly declines, and what he found shocked the entire research community. He found that nearly every case of deteriorating vision had one single root cause, and it's not aging, screen time, or even genetics, but instead a buildup in the microvessels of the retina that restricts blood flow and starves the eyes of oxygen and essential nutrients. But his research led to a powerful discovery, a simple red root method that he claims quickly flushes out years of buildup and floods the eyes with the nourishment they've been starved of for years, so they can stay sharp and clear. You can do it tonight, no matter how old you are, no matter if you've had vision problems for 3 months or 30 years. And that's exactly what happened with my wife, Laurel. After she started following the red root method, she noticed her eyes felt less strained, and the dark spots slowly began to fade. Before long, she was reading fine print again, and even felt confident driving at night, something she hadn't done in years. I was amazed. So I saved the exact video that showed us how to do this red root method from home. And now, you can watch it too, for free, by tapping the Watch Now button below. It doesn't involve pills, drops, or risky procedures. Just a natural method anyone can follow safely from home. Since then, I've shared it with friends and family, and many have noticed their eyesight feeling clearer and stronger too. That's why I truly believe everyone should watch this video while they can. If your vision has been getting worse, please don't ignore it. Tap the Watch Now button below to see how this red root method works and how you can easily start using it tonight.
To understand how one of the most ferocious tornado outbreaks in American history unfolded, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger picture. After all, severe weather outbreaks like this one don't just appear out of nowhere. They're the final, violent expression of a powder keg fueled with the right atmospheric ingredients. And in late April 2011, that powder keg ignited with rare and deadly force. Right on the heels of the forgotten outbreak, another wave of severe weather, a multi-day tornado outbreak sequence, would erupt across portions of the Midwest and Mid-South from April 19th to the 24th, producing another 134 tornadoes, including a violent EF4 that tore through the suburbs of St. Louis, Missouri, and slammed directly into St. Louis's Lambert International Airport. By the time forecasters had turned their attention to the setup developing for the final week of April, they weren't just looking at an atmosphere that was building towards something. They were looking at one that had been extremely volatile for weeks, and one that now, somehow, was preparing to outdo all of it. The weather system responsible for the 2011 super outbreak began, like they all do, high up in the atmosphere. A powerful dip in the jet stream, an upper-level trough, began carving its way across the central United States, acting like a giant atmospheric engine, fueling rising air and storms below. By April the 25th, the upper-level system had moved into the southern plains and helped spin up a large, intensifying area of low pressure near the Oklahoma-Missouri border. As that low strengthened and pushed off to the northeast, it began pulling two very different air masses onto a collision course. Warm, humid air would begin surging northward from the Gulf, and cooler, drier air would sweep down behind the system from the Rockies. Think of it like two freight trains on the same track, each carrying a different kind of fuel, and there's no way to stop the crash. The Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, had already been watching the system closely, and on April 25th, they would issue a moderate risk outlook for severe weather for portions of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana. The next morning, that would be upgraded to a rare high risk for April the 26th. And to put this in perspective, high risk outlooks are only issued a handful of times per year, sometimes only a handful of times per decade. That means that high risk days aren't just a warning that bad weather is possible. They are a declaration that a major, potentially devastating severe weather event is coming. Then, as the system would push east and the threat zone would shift towards the deep south, another high risk was issued, this time for April 27th, covering much of Alabama and Mississippi.
Good choice on the new HVAC system. We'll get to work on the installation.
Excuse me, I'm the fourth kid, and I have the third room on the left. My room's an oven in the summer, and it's freezing in the winter.
I had 3 older sisters too, I get it. Tell you what, I'll even teach you how to control the temp from your phone.
Are you saying they'll have consistent temperatures in every room?
Not to worry, my man, Rude's got you covered.
Take control of your home's comfort. Call your local pro partner and upgrade to a Rude high-efficiency HVAC system today.
It's fair to assume that I know quite a bit about law. After all, my name is Jude. That's why Legora, the legal AI company, hired me to be the face of their brand. So, in this advertisement, my face will be displayed. Hello.
2 high risks, 2 consecutive days for 2 different regions. Forecasters were essentially watching the atmosphere construct a catastrophe in real time and could do nothing but warn people it was coming. At the core of the danger were 3 factors: instability, moisture, and wind shear. Together, they didn't just create conditions ripe for tornadoes. They created conditions ripe for the worst kind. Violent EF4s and EF5s, capable of staying on the ground for tens of miles to hundreds of miles. Instability, after all, is essentially the atmosphere's eagerness to allow air to rise violently. And as we've discussed many times on my channel, meteorologists measure this instability using CAPE to quantify essentially how much the atmosphere can fuel a rising storm. CAPE values above 2,000 joules per kilogram are already considered strong enough to support violent thunderstorms. But on April the 27th, CAPE values were forecast to reach nearly 3,000 across parts of the South. At those levels, the atmosphere isn't just capable of producing severe storms. It becomes a loaded cannon waiting for a spark to ignite. Feeding that instability was an exceptionally deep surge of moisture streaming northward from the Gulf. Surface dew points, a direct measure of the humidity, climbed into the upper 60s and even low 70s Fahrenheit across the region. Those are values you'd expect over the deep South in July, not over the Alabama countryside in April. The air was saturated with energy and was practically dripping with it. Then came the morning of April 27th. An early round of severe storms would sweep through Alabama and Tennessee, producing tornadoes and damaging winds. Under normal circumstances, that kind of activity would stabilize the atmosphere, essentially spending the energy that it would be built up throughout the day. But breaks in the clouds in the morning let the sun hammer back down onto the surface, reheating the ground and recharging the instability, allowing the atmosphere to reload for another round of violent storms later in the day. And those violent storms later in the day brought the final, most alarming ingredient: extreme wind shear. Wind shear, after all, is just how wind changes speed and direction with height, as we've discussed many times before. And it's what separates a garden variety thunderstorm from a long-lived, violently rotating supercell. On April 27th, the jet stream was roaring overhead of Alabama and Mississippi at 80 to 100 knots. That's roughly 90 to 115 miles per hour. While near the surface, a low-level jet would funnel warm, moist air northward from the Gulf at 40 to 60 knots. This meant the wind didn't just change speed with height, it spun in direction, shifting from southerly at the ground to southwesterly aloft, known as backing by meteorologists. That layered, twisting wind profile would create invisible horizontal tubes of rotating air throughout the lower atmosphere. And when a storm's powerful updraft would punch through those tubes, it would tilt the rotation upward, and suddenly you have a rotating thunderstorm, a supercell. As everything came together, the forecasters watching all of this knew exactly what they were seeing. And over that full 4-day period, from April 24th to the 28th, the SPC would issue 56 severe weather watches, including 41 tornado watches, 10 of them carrying the label particularly dangerous situation, a designation reserved for events where violent, long-track tornadoes aren't just possible, but all but certain. Local weather offices, emergency managers, and TV meteorologists across the country would echo that alarm as loudly as they could in the day leading up to the outbreak. In fact, many of the meteorologists on duty for the outbreak would later say that the atmospheric signals they were witnessing beforehand were the most alarming of their careers, and that the coming outbreak was truly a once-in-a-generation event. Yet, even with all of the advanced warnings, all the preparations, and all of the days of advance notice, what was about to unfold would be nothing short of catastrophic for portions of the southern United States. Everything began on Monday, April 25th, 2011. That day, the sky over the Mid-South began to reveal its intentions. The air itself felt charged, swollen with moisture drawn northward from the Gulf, pulling beneath that powerful upper-level trough carving into the western United States. The atmosphere, primed and volatile, waited only for a trigger. And by mid-afternoon, that trigger would arrive in discrete supercell thunderstorms, those rotating, self-sustaining engines capable of producing the strongest tornadoes, erupted across Arkansas, each one a towering cathedral of churning cloud and lightning. At 3:25 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the Storm Prediction Center escalated its wording, issuing a particularly dangerous situation tornado watch for much of Arkansas and neighboring states. As evening approached, one supercell began to distinguish itself. It tracked menacingly near Little Rock, its radar signature tightening, its rotation intensifying, and around 6:48 p.m. Central Daylight Time.
At Ashley, our dining room furniture is made for all of life's moments. From intimate meals to large gatherings, there's always room for one more. Discover functional pieces made for moments big and small. Shop in-store and online.
The storm would drop a large, wedge tornado in rural, western Pulaski County, Arkansas. Moving swiftly to the northeast, the large tornado would tear across open countryside before setting its sights on the city of Valonia, Arkansas. And around 7:30 p.m., the large wedge tornado, cloaked from view by curtains of rain, would descend on Valonia. The tornado, while later only rated an EF2 with winds estimated between 120 and 130 miles per hour, tore through Valonia with devastating force. Homes would lose their roofs as debris was strewn across fields and tangled in trees. And, sadly, 4 people would lose their lives in Valonia alone, and many more would be injured as the town was carved open by the rotating column of wind. Earlier on the same day, another strong tornado had struck near Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Rated an EF3, it carried winds capable of shredding roofs and snapping mature trees like matchsticks. 1 person was killed there, adding to the growing death toll. And by the end of April 25th, 42 tornadoes had struck multiple states. 5 lives had been lost, all in Arkansas. and countless structures had been damaged or destroyed. Early on April 26th, the SPC elevated its Day 1 severe weather outlook from a moderate to a rare high risk for a region spanning eastern Texas, Arkansas, northern Louisiana, and southern Oklahoma, the same areas that were devastated the day before. This was a reflection of the rapidly worsening conditions as the upper level trough approached and wind shear continued to climb. Across eastern Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana, explosive instability and ferocious wind shear were combining to fire numerous supercells through the afternoon. Large hail and tornadoes would roll across northeast Texas and Arkansas as evening fell. Then, as darkness came, those discrete storms began merging into a fast-moving squall line that raced eastward through the night. What followed was remarkable and unsettling. While squall lines are typically associated with straight-line winds and usually only produce weaker spin-up tornadoes, this one had enough shear embedded within it to continuously spin up tornado after tornado, some of them even being strong EF2+ to violence tornadoes. By the time the QLCS had moved from Arkansas into Mississippi, it would produce 55 tornadoes across the region, 21 of them within the NWS Jackson, Mississippi forecast area alone. Astonishingly, 11 of these tornadoes that were embedded within the squall line had been rated EF2 or stronger, many with long damage tracks. Yet, thankfully, April 26th would end with no fatalities, even though the damage was extensive. Yet, all of this violence had been a mere prelude to the destruction that would follow the following day. Wednesday.
This will be an outbreak of historic proportion.
April 27th.
The last 36 hours have been probably the most trying time in this community's history.
2011.
This will be a day that will go down in state history.
Is a date etched not only into the meteorological record books, but into the collective memory of the American South. Over 200 tornadoes would strike the United States before the day was over, an astonishing concentration of violent, long-track storms carving scars across the landscape. These next 24 hours of catastrophe would unfold into relentless waves. A pre-dawn assault that tore through the darkness, followed by an even more ferocious barrage of supercells that would rise with the afternoon heat and rage on into the night. Before sunrise, the remnants of the April 26th squall line swept eastward through Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, and Kentucky. In what appeared on radar as a quasi-linear convective system, a meteorological term for an unbroken line of storms, would mask far more sinister reality. In the blackness of early morning, this QLCS roared through Alabama with unexpected fury, producing destructive straight-line winds of 70 to 80 miles per hour and tornadoes. Communities would be battered as trees would snap and power lines would crumple, plunging entire neighborhoods into darkness. In central Alabama alone, at least 10 tornadoes spun out of the early morning line, some of them reaching EF3 intensity, a feat rare for QLCS tornadoes. At around 5 to 5:30 a.m. Central Daylight Time, a tornado would tear through portions of Tuscaloosa and Jefferson counties. Later known as the Coaling tornado, it carried winds near 155 miles per hour and carved a 20-mile path through the nightly gloom. At nearly the same time, Cordova, Alabama would be struck by an EF3 tornado, injuring 20 people. Yet again, all of this only a prelude. In northern Alabama, Coleman County endured its own pre-dawn tornadoes, an EF1 near Liberty around 5 a.m., followed by an EF2 near Odenville just after 6. Across Alabama, at least 9 people would be injured through the morning wave, though remarkably, no fatalities were reported in the state with the morning round. The morning storms left tens of thousands without power and scattered debris along highways and fields. Though forecasters had warned of a second, more volatile round once the atmosphere recovered, the early chaos had already blurred judgment and frayed nerves, and the lull that followed was deceptive. As the morning would wear on, a capping inversion would take shape above Mississippi and Alabama. Accordingly, skies began to clear out, and by late morning the sun was shining over a landscape bathed in 80-degree Fahrenheit temperatures, and while dew points would soar into the lower 70s Fahrenheit. This clearing allowed the atmosphere across both states to recharge like a battery and become extremely unstable. NWS forecasters and broadcast meteorologists like James Spann of Birmingham, Alabama, knew that once this atmospheric cap gave way that afternoon, convection would just explode across the region. That spark would come shortly after noon Central Daylight Time, when isolated thunderstorms began erupting across central and eastern Mississippi. These storms wasted no time in taking full advantage of the once-in-a-generation atmospheric conditions surrounding them. Any thunderstorms that began to form would rapidly evolve into discrete, rotating supercells. And as the early afternoon wore on, meteorologists watched with mounting dread as cell after cell developed textbook supercellular structures within minutes, hook echoes curling with precision, with their velocity signatures tightening ominously. The first violent tornado of the afternoon emerged from a supercell developing near Jackson, Mississippi, drifting swiftly to the northeast beneath an increasingly unstable sky. At approximately 2:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, just east of the Philadelphia Municipal Airport in Neshoba County, Mississippi, the storm would produce its tornado. Within its first 8 minutes on the ground, this tornado was already causing extreme damage. Traveling along Mississippi Highway 21, the tornado quickly intensified, and a brick home near the intersection with Highway 491 would be leveled and partially swept away. On Doppler radar, a tight debris ball confirmed what was unfolding on the ground. As the tornado moved through northeastern Neshoba County, it literally dug trenches into open fields, some nearly 2 feet deep. Grass would be ripped out by the roots, and massive trees would be uprooted, stripped of bark and limbs, and hurled through the air like toys. Winds in the area would later be estimated at 205 miles per hour, strong enough not just to destroy structures, but to erase them entirely. Around 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time, roughly 6 miles north of Meshulaville, the tornado would finally dissipate. The Philadelphia EF5 had been on the ground for only 29 miles, but its violence was extraordinary, a somber indication of what would come later in the day. 3 people would be killed by this EF5 monster, with winds peaking near 205 miles per hour. And it would become the first EF5 tornado recorded in Mississippi since the Candlestick Park F5 in 1966. As the Philadelphia EF5 was still on the ground in Mississippi, another supercell to the northeast was about to unleash an even more devastating tornado in Alabama. Around 3 p.m. Central Daylight Time, a supercell over southwestern Marion County, Alabama, would drop a tornado just southwest of the city of Hamilton. This tornado rapidly grew into a violent wedge as it tore across the county, slamming into the north side of Hackleburg at around 3:30 p.m. In Hackleburg, well-built homes would be swept completely off their foundations, and 2 concrete storm shelters were partially torn out of the ground. Large swaths of the town's buildings were leveled, most scoured down to bare concrete slabs. The tornado then flattened the local elementary school, the local high school, and a Wrangler jeans factory along US Highway 43, before continuing northeast into southern Franklin County. The next town to feel the tornado's full wrath was the small community of Phil Campbell. Here, the tornado would rip the roof off a concrete storm shelter as it entered the town, sweeping away several homes, some with their block foundations destroyed. and scour a 25-foot section of pavement from a road, scattering chunks of the asphalt up to a third of a mile away. By the time the tornado crossed into Lawrence and Limestone counties, storm surveyors would later note corridors of high-end EF4 to near EF5 damage. And in the community of Tanner, the twister would completely wipe out several large anchor-bolted homes and destroy a Doppler radar tower operated by local television affiliate WAFF 48, dramatically bending the steel frame to the ground. As the tornado would near the Huntsville metro area in Madison County, the tornado would weaken slightly, but still produce EF3 to EF4 damage in neighborhoods like Anderson Hills and Harvest, before finally lifting around 4:50 p.m. near the community of Gladstone. In total, the Hackleburg Phil Campbell EF5 would be on the ground for 2 hours, covering an astonishing 132-mile path across Alabama. Winds within the tornado would later be estimated at 210 miles per hour, and the tornado would travel at a forward speed of nearly 70 miles per hour. This tornado would kill 71 people, becoming the deadliest tornado in Alabama's state history.
As Americans, we're fair and logical. 83% of us favor requiring a photo ID to vote. In fact, most of the civilized world requires it, but not us. We need to be able to trust that only eligible Americans are casting ballots. Democrats oppose voter ID for no coherent reason. Republicans favor it but haven't acted. What are they waiting for? Call your United States senators and tell them to pass the Save America Act today.
At Ollie's, you'll save money on a lot of real brands like can even, and everything is up to 70% off the fancy store prices.
I got this awesome vacuum.
The good paper towels.
I got my favorite shampoo. All these dolls.
You won't believe what you'll find and how much you'll save.
Holy sh!
Ollie's! Good stuff, cheap!
It would also go on to injure 145 and cause an estimated $1.29 billion in damage. Not long after the Hackleburg Phil Campbell EF5 would touch down, another supercell would produce a violent tornado in north central Alabama. This EF4 would touch down near Coleman around 2:45 and gained immediate notoriety when it was captured live on ABC 3340's tower cams. A large, multiple vortex tornado grinding through downtown Coleman in broad daylight. Numerous historic churches and brick buildings would be heavily damaged or destroyed, and at least 6 fatalities would occur along its path. The tornado would remain on the ground for roughly 47 miles, roaring through Coleman County and into Marshall County, tearing through communities including Hanceville, Walter, and Arab. Meanwhile, back in Mississippi, another supercell would be ready to spawn a catastrophic tornado. At 3:43 p.m. Central Daylight Time, as the storm would approach the Tennessee Tombigbee Waterway, just southwest of the small town of Smithville, another violent tornado wouldn't just drop from the sky. This one would quite literally drill into the earth and immediately begin producing violent damage. Trees would snap near the Smithville recreational area, and the ground itself would be scoured as the tornado accelerated toward the town. Within moments, this tornado would reach EF5 strength as it crossed Davis Road south, gouging deep trenches into open fields surrounding the road. Entering Smithville at around 3:45, with winds estimated at 205 miles per hour. The tornado reduced well-built brick homes to bare slabs. A bed and breakfast would be swept entirely from its foundation. Semi-trucks would be thrown hundreds of yards, and one was torn apart so completely that its bumper was later found hanging from the town's water tower more than a mile away. This tornado would also launch a Ford Explorer half a mile into that same water tower, leaving a large dent in the side before being hurled even further and crushed beyond recognition. As the tornado would go on to tear through the town's eastern subdivision, it reached its most violent phase. Here, plumbing was sheared off at the ground level. Floor tiles would be stripped away. Sill plates would be ripped from foundations. The city hall, post office, Police station and medical clinic, as well as multiple churches, would be destroyed, and a large brick funeral home would be reduced to a slab. Vehicles would be wrapped around trees and twisted repeatedly by the violent subvortices. In a town of just roughly 900 people, 23 would be killed, and more than 130 would be injured. After bulldozing Smithville, the tornado continued northeast into Itawamba County and across the Alabama state line. It would weaken at times before surging again near Scottsville, Alabama, destroying homes and killing 7 more people before finally lifting at 423. EF5's path would stretch 37 miles in total length, with 23 lives being lost along its track. And while the Smithville EF5 was still on the ground, another tornado would quietly begin what would become the longest track tornado in Alabama history. At approximately 3:40 p.m. Central Daylight Time, a tornado would touch down in northeastern Pickens County, Alabama. As the storm would push into Tuscaloosa County, the tornado would intensify to EF3 strength near State Route 171, stripping bark from hardwood trees and destroying a home, killing 4 people. The storm would pulse stronger still as it wove between the Tuscaloosa and Fayette County lines, obliterating mobile homes, twisting frames apart, and lofting debris into the sky. South of Oakman, the tornado would knock down a cell tower and roll vehicles before surging again near Interstate 22, or what was then known as Corridor X. The now half-mile wide EF3 would tear into Cordova, a town that had already been struck by another EF3 tornado that very morning. Homes would be swept from their foundations, and downtown buildings that had survived the first assault would be shattered by the second. The City Hall, a Piggly Wiggly grocery store, and a Methodist church would be destroyed. 4 people would die in Cordova alone. Vegetation would be stripped from the ground, leaving a raw scar through the heart of the town. East of Cordova, the tornado refused to weaken. It crossed the Mulberry Fork of the Black Warrior River 7 times as it drove northeast through rural Walker and Blount counties, intensifying into a violent EF4. By the time the tornado would finally dissipate near Blountsville, just before 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, it had been on the ground for over 2 hours and 15 minutes, carving a 127.8-mile path across 7 Alabama counties, leaving 13 people dead and at least 54 injured. But if there was one tornado...
Watch hit movies and TV shows on YouTube. Stream Outlander now.
What's wrong?
Frank Randall. He wrote there'll be a battle in about a year's time at a place called King's Mountain. He says I die. You should all go back. War is coming.
I am meant to be here.
Get Stars and more streaming channels to watch your favorites on YouTube.
That came to embody the entire outbreak, the one that still comes up in people's minds when April 27th is spoken aloud. It was the massive wedge that took aim at the city of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, later that afternoon. It all began in rural Greene County around 4:40 p.m. Central Daylight Time, descending from a supercell that had already proven itself capable of violence. At first, the tornado moved with deceptive restraint, a broad wedge at EF2 intensity. Then, near Union at 4:50 p.m., meteorologist John Oldshoe, chasing the storm for James Spann's live coverage on Birmingham's ABC 3340, would capture the first live images of the tornado on the ground. By 5:10 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the tornado was bearing down on the southern edge of Tuscaloosa. Skycams from multiple television stations would track the storm in real time as it approached. And for a fleeting moment, the visible condensation funnel lifted within a churning debris cloud, an illusion of weakening, before the condensation funnel would drop back to the surface, subvortices spinning like hidden blades, and entering the city. The tornado would cross 35th Street and obliterate an industrial area, toppling a cell phone tower and crushing warehouses. Continuing northeast, it passed within a half mile of the Tuscaloosa Police Department headquarters, forcing dispatchers to flee their posts. The Tuscaloosa County Emergency Management Building would take a direct hit and would be destroyed, its equipment and vehicles mangled in seconds. Then, the tornado smashed into residential neighborhoods. Streets of modest homes and apartment complexes would vanish beneath it. And near the intersection of 15th Street and McFarland Boulevard, Businesses and restaurants were flattened at low-end EF4 strength. Cars were hurled or crushed where they stood. The Cedar Crest subdivision would be shredded, block foundation homes being reduced to bare slabs. In Alberta City, the destruction deepened. 2 apartment buildings would be completely flattened. And along University Boulevard, a shopping center collapsed into ruin. At the Chastain Manor Apartments, buildings would be obliterated and partially swept from the ground. A manhole cover would be ripped free and thrown into a ravine. As it moved into Holt, the tornado expanded from a half mile to nearly a mile wide, still at EF4 intensity. Entire rows of homes would be leveled, and crossing Hurricane Creek, it would mangle a massive metal railroad trestle and hurl a 34-ton truss structure 100 feet up a hill. At Holt Lake, boats would be tossed more than 300 feet, and a marina and restaurant would be reduced to wreckage. Debris from Tuscaloosa would be carried high into the storm and would later fall from the sky over Jefferson County, more than 20 miles away. By 6 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the tornado had reached its maximum intensity and was now a colossal, rain-wrapped wedge tearing into the western and northern suburbs of Birmingham, the state's largest city, at high-end EF4 strength. Concord, Pleasant Grove, McDonald's Chapel, subdivision after subdivision would be struck with catastrophic force. At a coal yard, a nearly 36-ton coal car would be hurled 391 feet through the air. And in McDonald Chapel, the tornado continued destroying homes and warehouses, ripping roofs from brick houses and scattering vehicles across the landscape. Crossing into the city of Birmingham proper, it would tear through Pratt City and strike the suburb of Fultondale, mangling light poles along Interstate 65 and damaging commercial buildings along US 31. Even as the tornado narrowed and began to lose its structure, it remained dangerous until finally dissipating just after 6:14 p.m. in northern Jefferson County. Along the storm's 81-mile-long path through portions of Greene, Tuscaloosa, and Jefferson counties, the tornado would kill 65 people and injure more than 1,500. Over 5,000 structures were destroyed or severely damaged, and losses would approach $2.4 billion. But remember, the Tuscaloosa tornado didn't terrorize alone. At the very same time the tornado was getting ready to strike Tuscaloosa and Northport, another long-track tornado would carve its own path of destruction just to its southeast, across Hale, Greene, and Bibb counties. This tornado, solidly at EF3 strength with winds near 145 miles per hour, would be on the ground for more than 72 miles, dragging destruction from one community to the next. 7 people would be killed and 50 would be injured. Around Sawyerville and Olean, homes would be ripped apart and familiar places would be rendered unrecognizable. And meanwhile, as all of this chaos was occurring in central Alabama, off to the west in central Mississippi, they were already staring down yet another threat. Near the small village of Raleigh in rural Smith County, a tornado would touch down around 5:42 p.m. Central Time and drive northeast for more than 90 miles, striking the small towns of Enterprise and Lewin, Mississippi at EF4 intensity and causing catastrophic damage to both towns. The tornado would move on, causing EF2 to EF1 damage after crossing into Alabama near Yantly before finally dissipating near Fonsdale. Along that path, the damage would escalate into the high-end EF3 to low-end EF4 destruction range, with the worst occurring in Smith, Jasper, and Clark counties in Mississippi. The EF4 would leave 7 more people dead and at least 17 injured by the time it was over.
Watch baseball all season long. Catch the action live with game day features like StatsView and more from the best seat in the house. YouTube TV. Try it free. Terms apply. Cancel anytime.
As the afternoon light began to fade, the atmosphere over northeastern Alabama seemed unwilling to surrender its violence. At approximately 6:19 p.m., a tornado would touch down near the community of Lakeview, northeast of Geraldine, Alabama. In its opening minutes, the damage appeared almost restrained compared to the others that day. Trees would be snapped, smaller buildings would be splintered, but nothing compared to what had happened before. The tornado would move northeast, parallel to Alabama Highway 75 toward the community of Fife, cycling through structural transformations. Witnesses described thin, writhing subvortices orbiting a broader circulation, but then a solid wedge lowering to the earth. By the time the tornado would cross near Beulah Baptist Cemetery into Fife, homes were being torn apart and swaths of timber flattened. Along Heaton Road, the tornado would first exhibit EF5 intensity, as a metal farm building would simply vanish. Homes would be reduced to slabs, some so thoroughly that little remained but faint outlines on the bare earth. Ground scouring would appear in streaks across the fields. By the time this tornado approached the town of Rainsville, around 6:30 p.m., the tornado had expanded to nearly a half-mile wide and reached its peak ferocity, marking it as the fourth and final EF5 tornado of the day. Entire neighborhoods would be decimated with near surgical thoroughness. Homes and businesses would be swept from their foundations, debris scattered up to a mile away. A school bus would be thrown across a highway and stripped to its chassis, and a restaurant's steel frame would be twisted until only a single wall remained. In a narrow corridor east of downtown Rainsville along Lingerfelt Road, the storm's devastation would reach a particularly extreme level. Here, a well-built stone house would be simply obliterated. Its heavy cement and stone support pillars would be uprooted, and sections of its foundation would be lifted and displaced. An 800-pound safe would be torn from its anchorage to the foundation and hurled more than 600 feet, with its door being ripped clean off. An above-ground safe room would be ripped from the foundation, the family inside surviving, but the event would underscore this was violence at some of the highest measurable levels we'd ever seen. After carving a roughly 34-mile path through Alabama and killing 25 people in and around Rainsville and Sylvania, the tornado would then cross into Georgia and moved through Rising Fawn before finally dissipating over Dade County, Georgia at 6:55 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. The same supercell that had unleashed the Rainsville EF5 would cycle once more as it crossed the Georgia-Tennessee border, producing another tornado that descended near the state line and would quickly grow in size and strength. By the time the tornado bore down on the town of Ringgold, Georgia, just after 8:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, it had taken on the heavy, deliberate shape of something intent on staying. Ringgold would feel the full weight of it. Interstate-side hotels and restaurants would be crushed and peeled apart. In a nearby subdivision along Cherokee Valley Road, well-constructed homes would be swept from their foundations at EF4 intensity, reduced to bare slabs in minutes. 8 people would be killed in the Ringgold area alone, and many in that single neighborhood. The tornado would then press north into Tennessee, carving into Appleton just southeast of Chattanooga and toward the outskirts of Cleveland. Even after miles on the ground, it would retain punishing strength, destroying dozens more homes and leaving entire streets unrecognizable. 12 people in Tennessee would lose their lives along its path, bringing the total death toll to 20, with more than 300 injured. Even after 9:00 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, tornadoes would continue touching down across Georgia and Tennessee, pushing east into the Appalachian region under the cover of darkness. Just before midnight, an EF3 would strike near Glade Spring, Virginia, killing 4 in a region unaccustomed to such violence. Meanwhile, in eastern Tennessee, multiple nighttime tornadoes would move through the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, including an EF4 that tore a vast scar through the forests of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, mercifully sparing populated areas, but leaving a visible wound across the ridges. Only in the early hours of April 28th did the cold front finally shove the remaining storms off the Atlantic coast, finally ending Mother Nature's 3-day-long rampage across the southern United States. By the numbers, the 2011 super outbreak was truly and is truly still unparalleled in modern records. Over the span of just 3 days, 7 hours and 18 minutes, a record-shattering 368 confirmed tornadoes would touch down across the United States. 224 of them, roughly 60%, occurred on April the 27th alone. Of these tornadoes, an astonishing 4 would go on to be rated at the top of the enhanced Fujita scale, the dreaded EF5, a feat only surpassed by the 1974 super outbreak 7 F5s. Another 11 tornadoes would be rated EF4s, and 23 more would be rated EF3s. Several of these strong, violent tornadoes were exceptionally long-tracked, with at least 6 carving paths more than 60 miles in length. Yet the numbers pale in comparison to the effect on the people who withstood this violent onslaught. While the entire Southeast was left reeling, 6 states in particular would bear the heaviest burden. The tornadoes would be directly responsible for 4 deaths in Virginia, 5 in Arkansas, 14 in Georgia, 31 in Mississippi, and 32 in Tennessee. But it was the people of Alabama who would bear the biggest loss. In total, 238 Alabamians would lose their lives in the outbreak, with most fatalities occurring on April 27th, cementing the day in infamy as the deadliest tornado day in Alabama state history. In some places, the destruction was so complete that streets lost their meaning. Familiar landmarks had simply vanished, and a person could stand in the ruins of their own backyard and not even recognize it. That kind of erasure is not only physical, it cuts straight at the heartstrings of your identity. When a tornado takes a home, it scatters that record into fields and treetops and buried debris. And what is lost is not only shelter, but continuity. Search and rescue would begin in most affected communities as soon as the storms had passed. And they would continue for days, sometimes in the rain, sometimes in the eerie calm that follows the catastrophe. There is a peculiar quality to those hours, a fragile coexistence of hope and dread, when the possibility of finding someone alive keeps hands moving through rubble, while the growing list of names quietly tells another truth. In many places, rescue became recovery, a word that sounds almost gentle, but which meant, on the ground, lifting broken lumber one board at a time until the person beneath it could be carried out with care and dignity. On top of the destruction, the failure of ordinary systems would compound all of the problems. Power lines would come down across vast stretches of the South, and in northern Alabama, tornadoes would destroy major Tennessee Valley Authority transmission infrastructure, plunging most northern Alabama cities and rural communities alike into darkness. Water systems would fail, and communications would be severed. Roads would be blocked by debris, and some had their asphalt literally peeled up and rolled back by the force of the winds. Without power, gas stations couldn't pump fuel. Without working cell towers, people couldn't call for help. Hospitals would absorb a different kind of crisis. In Tuscaloosa, the injured arrived in numbers that quickly overwhelmed emergency rooms. Staff were forced into triage at a scale no one practices for willingly, making rapid decisions about who needed intervention immediately, who could wait, and who required transfer to facilities further away. Whether someone survived sometimes depended on not only whether they had received a warning or found shelter in time, but on whether the road to the hospital was passable, whether the hospital still had power, and whether a helicopter could land in the dark. In smaller towns, the destruction carried a particular weight. When a small town loses its core, it loses something harder to name. In Hackleburg and Phil Campbell, the tornadoes not only killed and injured people, they dismantled the economic and civic structures that gave those communities their shape. A factory loss is not only lost income, it's lost stability, the reason for the young to stay, and the lost confidence in the future. Schools were damaged, churches reduced to rubble. To rebuild in that context is not a return. It is a reinvention, undertaken in grief, with no guarantee that whatever existed before could ever be recreated. Alongside the physical losses were the ones that hollowed entire communities from within. Multiple deaths, sometimes in a single family, parents burying their children. These were not abstractions. They were particular people, their names, their faces, the empty places they left in kitchens and church pews and classrooms that no rebuilding program could ever address. This trauma does not always arrive in the immediate hours after. Sometimes it comes later, in your sleep, or in repeating images or sounds, in the reflexive flinch when a weather radio sounds, or in the way a darkening sky can tighten the stomach of someone who was never afraid of the clouds before. Mental health services expanded in the months after the outbreak because the need was undeniable. Survivors were living with PTSD, anxiety that reshaped daily life for years. In addition to the destruction to the South's cities, towns, and people, the landscape itself would bear its own scars from the catastrophe. Entire sections of forests had been leveled, with NASA satellite imagery capturing stripped corpses.
Tomorrow. That means.
Let me see you guys pass the ball. Come on. Really?
Think it's impossible to have the best names on.
April 2011.
There's tremendous physical damage, tremendous natural damage.
Amidst one of the April 2011.
There's tremendous physical damage, tremendous natural damage.
Amidst one of the most active, destructive, and deadly tornado months on record for the United States, the southeastern U.S. would endure a brutal tornado outbreak, one that, because of timing, would quickly fade into obscurity.
This is a deadly tornado situation.
From April 14th to 16th, 2011, a sprawling tornado outbreak unleashed 178 tornadoes across 16 states, killing 38 people and leaving behind about $2.1 billion in damage. But just 2 weeks later, the record-shattering super outbreak, so massive, so catastrophic, and so wall-to-wall in coverage, would thrust the mid-April outbreak into obscurity. And in the shadow of that disaster, the 2011 forgotten outbreak became a footnote, largely erased from national memory. Today, we're diving into the story of a major tornado outbreak that you may have never heard of, to relive the ferocity and to tell the story of the communities that endured nature's most powerful forces.
Whirling in the air, large debris.
I'm CJ, and this is Florida Man Weather. Tornado outbreaks rarely happen because the air near the ground is merely warm and humid, or because the air aloft is merely cold, or because winds are merely strong. They happen when these ingredients all overlap in the same place at the same time, like gears meshing or like a baker baking a cake, so that storms can both ignite and sustain rotation long enough to become violent. By April 13th, a deep upper-level trough, that pronounced dip in the jet stream, came ashore in the western United States. At the surface, the response was swift. As the upper system pushed east, pressure fell rapidly across the high plains, and a low-pressure center took shape east of the Rockies, then organized further as it tracked from the Texas Panhandle toward Kansas. Inside the warm sector and ahead of the cold front, moisture and instability surged to unusually high levels for mid-April. Dew points climbed into the mid-60s Fahrenheit across parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and beyond, a sign that the lower atmosphere wasn't just damp at the surface, but deeply saturated with Gulf air. That depth matters because it helps storms maintain buoyancy, and it prevents inflow from being starved by dry air. Meanwhile, the approaching trough cooled the mid-levels, steepening the lapse rates and making the air temperature drop faster with height. To put it simply, the air near the ground wanted to rise, and the air aloft offered less resistance. And on outbreak days, while Cape often becomes a headline number, it's not the whole story. High Cape can produce explosive storms, yeah, but without the right wind structure, those storms collapse quickly or they just merge into messy clusters. The more decisive ingredient for tornadoes is often wind shear, how the wind changes speed and direction with height. This was the kind of setup where shear wasn't merely present, it was layered and aggressive. In the lowest few thousand feet, winds tended to back, meaning they turned more easterly in the warm sector while strengthening at night as the low-level jet would intensify. While above that, winds increased markedly and veered, meaning they turned more southerly to southwesterly, with height as the jet stream approached. That combination creates a corkscrew-like environment where air flowing into a storm already contains spin. When rotation tightens and becomes focused near the ground, that's what helps form a tornado, at least we understand it does. In parts of the southeast, as the system moved east, analyses showed extreme instability, also paired with a remarkably high low-level helicity, which is just an index of how strongly the wind profile supports rotating storms. And in a practical sense, this meant that any storm that became a sustained supercell would have a concerning chance of producing not just tornadoes, but strong, long-tracked tornadoes, especially if it could remain isolated and away from messy interactions. Forecasters saw this pattern sharpening long before the first warnings had been issued. And while severe weather forecasting is a balancing act between what the atmosphere can do and what it is likely to do, by April 14th, the can-do was becoming increasingly alarming. The Storm Prediction Center escalated concerns day by day as the threat zone migrated east. A moderate risk over the southern plains on April 14th, a moderate risk shifting into the deep south on the 15th, and then on April 16th, a rare high risk focused over eastern North Carolina. This would be the first high risk issued in 2011. The first phase of the outbreak would arrive on April 14th like a door unlatching. Early in the day, a stabilizing cap, or a layer of warmer air aloft that suppresses storm growth, helped keep the warm sector from erupting too soon. The cap can be protective in the morning, preventing widespread storms that would use up instability before the best shear arrives. But on an outbreak day, it can become a trap, and when it finally breaks, all of that stored energy is released quickly and violently, often in a relatively focused corridor. Heating and subtle lift from the approaching system weakened the cap over Oklahoma. Thunderstorms developed with startling speed, and in the high shear environment, they did not remain ordinary storms for long. The forgotten outbreak announced itself not with a whisper, but with a calculated, almost deliberate strike. An opening blow cast upon the southern plains on Thursday, April 14th. From the first uneasy hours of the morning, something about the sky over Oklahoma felt unsettled, as though the atmosphere were straining against an unseen restraint. And by midday, the tension would finally snap. Along the dry line in eastern Oklahoma, towering cumulus clouds began to rise across the horizon, not lazily drifting skyward, but boiling upward with purpose. The clouds swelled into anvils that smeared across the heavens, their undersides darkening from charcoal to a bruised, malignant green. It was the color seasoned storm watchers knew too well, the shade of an atmosphere preparing to tear itself open, and we call it greenage. Within an hour, between 3 and 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time, the first supercells had already begun, their mesocyclones churning like colossal engines, lowering pendulous funnels towards the earth. Spotters tracked the storms as they skirted the eastern rim of the Oklahoma City metro. Most of the early tornadoes were brief and weak, thin, predatory shapes that dipped down and vanished. They left scars across open pasture and farmland, a warning written in dirt and splintered fence posts. But as the afternoon wore on, the daylight began to thin. The atmosphere, having tested its strength, shifted tone. The scattered skirmishes of early storms then gave way to something way more organized and way more ominous. By early evening in southeastern Oklahoma, a far more violent supercell surged to life. An immense rotating cathedral of cloud whose presence felt deliberate and cruel. At approximately 6:20 p.m. Central Daylight Time in southwestern Atoka County, a massive funnel descended from the storm, rapidly maturing into a monstrous, multi-vortex tornado.
Climate risk is no longer a distant threat. It's here. Disrupting operations, supply chains, and investment decisions. Climate volatility is likely already impacting your business, but it's difficult to translate that into operational decisions. That's why we built Resource Advisor Plus for climate risk, to turn climate uncertainty into decision-ready intelligence. Resource Advisor Plus gives you a complete view of where your climate risks exist across assets, operations, and suppliers. You'll also get a detailed breakdown of your risk across the specific hazards that impact your business, allowing you to zero in on what needs immediate attention.
The tornado drove east-northeast with grim intent, barreling straight into the small town of Tushka, Oklahoma. In Tushka, entire blocks of modest homes were crushed or swept from their foundations. Roofs vanished as though peeled away by invisible hands. Walls folded, vehicles tumbled end over end, and the air filled with splintered lumber, torn insulation, and the shriek of metal under stress. Debris rose high into the rotating column, vanishing into the cloud base before raining back down miles away. National Weather Service survey teams would later document a damage path up to 3/4 of a mile wide. And in the end, the Tushka tornado would be rated an EF3, carving a path nearly 17 miles long through portions of southeast Oklahoma, claiming 2 lives and injuring at least 43 others. Elsewhere across Oklahoma and into Arkansas, additional tornadoes touched down, EF2s, EF1s, and a swarm of weaker twisters that danced and later document a damage path up to 3/4 of a mile wide. And in the end, the Tushka tornado would be rated an EF3, carving a path nearly 17 miles long through portions of southeast Oklahoma, claiming 2 lives and injuring at least 43 others. Elsewhere across Oklahoma and into Arkansas, additional tornadoes touched down, EF2s, EF1s, and a swarm of